stops you getting it maybe, but I've heard that if you wear them and you've got it.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was the thing more that if you've got
I didn't feel like we were anything like that. So
Already.
okay.
So I went up there to do some root controls and I got contact with the last time.
So they wouldn't get that like the week or support because you might.
Well, yeah, they wouldn't get it so that they can week, but also just in case I was wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, really wouldn't be the one to sweat.
no.
Okay, so good morning. Good morning, everyone. So then again, this session, meditation, dividing it into two. The first part was settling the mind on the breath, and the second part, analytical meditation based on the text. And here today, focused on verses that we covered last week in the teachings with Geshe last week on the verses, the two verses actually, verse 20 and 21 or 19 and 20, sorry. And that is in relation, if people can remember. We're talking about being attentive to a wound, a physical wound, that we would be attentive to this in a crowd, very careful, protective of it. Then if we're like that, then likewise the wound of the mind, the open sore of the mind, the vulnerability of our mind to the arisal of the affliction. So we're very careful to make sure that we don't bring about the result, which the end result would be a hellish type of existence, or the various different types of suffering that arise when we activate these afflictions, these disturbing states of mind. So then anyway, to start the session with some minutes of focusing the mind, keeping the mind focused on the breath in order to remain in the present moment, and of course to prepare the mind for the main body of the meditation, and then also help with this to influence in a positive way the teachings we have today and other sessions, the discussion and tutorial. So then if you have your own method, to use that. Otherwise, this method of observing the sensation of the air coming in through the nostrils and coming out, as best as possible to maintain the awareness of the air coming in and out, but having that alertness of mind as the distractions arise, as the emotions arise, and as other types of distractions arise, to note these and not to be swept away by them. At the same time, not to try to crush them or oppress them, just to be aware of their arisal, like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond, and allowing them to dissolve back into the pond. So likewise here, to note those distractions and bring the mind back continuously with diligence, but also with gentleness. So continuing in this way. So then I'll just recite these two verses. Just as I would be attentive and conscientious of a wound when amidst an unruly freed crowd, so I should always guard the wounds of my mind when dwelling among negative people. If I am conscientious of a wound through fear of a small suffering of a wound, then why do I not guard the wounds of my mind through fear of being crushed by the mountains of mass destruction? Mountains of mass destruction referring to hellish states of existence. So here we're contemplating this, this text, Bodhisattva as a way of life, central text in Mahayana tradition, Tibetan Buddhist tradition, very central text in the lives of our teachers, a text which is frequently quoted by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, a text which some lamas hold in such great reverence that they've memorized all of the chapters. They could recite them all back. So it seemed to be very crucially important and beneficial text, not just something to be studied and then we study and we do it, we study and then we sit in an exam and we get a result, but as a text, we're reflecting on this in order to work on our minds. Because if we're Buddhists, we're inner beings, and even if we're not Buddhist, if we're tuned in here in this session in the Zoom, it shows a degree of commitment to inner transformation. And so we're the fortunate ones in that we're somehow made a connection with the Buddha Dharma and have got the time and circumstances to be able to attend these teachings. And then also, hopefully, of course, we're the sort of people who understand the importance of transforming our mind. Because there are many people, long time involved in Buddhism, long time involved in the center, even after many years, don't understand, if you see in their behavior, don't understand the difficulties in their life come from their own mind. Still believe all the difficulties in their life come from other people. But this text is saying, calling upon us to develop the wisdom understanding that the source of our problem is our mind. Source of our solution to our problem is also our mind. And what we're dealing with here is to be alert to the arisal of the disturbing states of mind, and of course the conditions, the people we connect with, the circumstances which allow for the arisal of these disturbing states of mind. The more that we really understand this in our own personal life, particularly we relate to our own experience of pain, suffering, and hell, the more that we become motivated to change, and we have that wonderful opportunity to experience change to our life because of a change in our heart, our mind, and understanding. Because if we depend upon the external things, it's never going to bring about satisfactory change in our existence, our life. So as they say with the afflictions that, this worst enemy is blind and it doesn't have any arms or legs, but it's that which destroys us. Far more damaging than any external enemy. And so we can look a little bit like this. The most important thing really is our own personal experience and our sense of our understanding of these verses so that they touch the heart. And we want to apply them. So for me, when going into prison, visiting prisons, there was one guy I was going to visit who had a terrible history of violence and finally murder. And now in prison for the rest of his life. We've basically thrown away the keys, I think. It'd be too controversial if this guy was released, even in many years in the future. And yet in talking to this person is totally reasonable, can develop rapport, can speak understanding ethics, recognizes the negativity of his actions, has remorse for them. But basically, when the conditions come together for him over his life, for him, the triggering was alcohol. Said he never committed any of his crimes without alcohol. It's not to blame alcohol to be the problem, but the point is here, we need to be alert because there are many other people around who have maybe the discernment of their weakness with alcohol. They don't take that alcohol and therefore they haven't committed those acts. They have very similar karma to perform the acts, but they understand. So the difference can be just in that awareness about their own mind and their own weakness. And so it is with us in our everyday life also. Being sensitive to our wounds, our vulnerability. And then there was a case of one woman who was killed by her partner with an axe. Horrendous. And yet her sister had been pleading with her way back at the early time of their relationship with a guy. Please, don't be with this guy. This guy is so dangerous. He may kill you. This was well on. The sister could see it. But because the girl who was killed, mind becomes very strongly influenced by the attachment, energy, by a mind that becomes deluded, can't see things clearly. And like a moth to a candle flame, when the afflictions take hold of your mind, you can't see, you're unable to see what's going to happen. Other people may be able to see it, but if you're not aware of what's taking place in your own mind, you end up in a situation in which your life becomes destroyed. She ends up like hell state, being killed in that way. So for us, maybe it's not been as dramatic at either of those two cases. But if we are an inner being, and if we've had problems in our life, our relationships and so on, most likely, particularly if there are patterns existing, it's related to our own afflictions. And it can be the case also as well, even when relationships end in an embittered way, not like that violence, but both groups of people with a lot of anger and hatred to each other and blaming each other. Basically, if we went back early time, the establishment of that relationship, there was a mind also that was blind, that didn't want to look to see the shortcomings existing in the other person, because then it might mean that you wouldn't enter into a relationship with that person. So insecure on the basis of the afflictions, the attachment, the neediness, no inner refuge, set ourselves on the pathway of this unsatisfactory relationship. And then if we've become Buddhists, if we have become Buddhists, at the time we became Buddhists, we made commitments to each of the three jewels. And one of the commitments in relation to the Sangha jewel was to avoid bad friends. And bad friends mean not in and of themselves there's anything necessarily bad about that other person. A bad friend is someone in whom you are connected, but as a result of that, it leads to a degeneration in your listening, reflecting, and meditating on the Buddha Dharma. And a degeneration in your compassion and wisdom. So this again, we need to be attentive to, as an inner being, really to be understanding our relationships with other people and how other people affect us. We have a responsibility to do this as a Buddhist. When we become Buddhist, we have a commitment there. This doesn't mean that we give up on people. We should never give up on one person, not even give up on the worst person. Never give up on anyone. You always have the attitude maintained, regardless of what happens, have a loving, caring mind towards others. But we, as apprentice Bodhisattvas, in the nursery of our development of our mind of bodhicitta, we need to protect this mind, just like you protect a plant by putting mesh around it, wire mesh around that plant. That plant may eventually grow into a huge, great tree, a mountain ash, or whatever. But initially, it's so easily destroyed by even the smallest of animals. So we need to protect our mind. We need to protect ourselves in our relationships with others in order that our Dharma practice does not degenerate. It's a matter of the priority. What is your value? What is our value in life? Inner practice. So of course we care for our friends. But it may be wise not to come so much under the influence and see them less often. When you see them, but you make the quality of that relationship, that connection, something positive. You make offering tea, cake, whatever. But you don't allow that relationship to lead to the degeneration of your listening, contemplating, meditating on the Buddha Dharma and the generation of loving kindness and wisdom. Because if we do, then again, under the influence of other people, we have the open wounds of the mind, and they continually will continue to weep under the influence of these people. It's not the people that's the problem, that's what happens within our mind. So it can even be the case of people who become involved in Buddhism, become very interested, maybe even attend the Buddhist studies program for quite some years, but then not alert to what's taking place within their mind. And the conditions come together, and their mind separates away from the Dharma. They don't listen, reflect, and meditate on the Dharma. And then the whole life and the people that they connect with, their life degenerates, becomes a life of misery and unhappiness. So then the more that we become aware of this and, look at we see other people, we see things from this perspective of how it is, the difficulties in other people's lives, then it becomes a means by which we see things from that perspective, allows to protect our own mind, and then also our own experience too. Probably that's the best experience, our own experience of how it is that when we haven't guarded our mind and we've allowed the afflictions to take over, and then our life becomes a disaster, relationship becomes a disaster, or our behavior degenerates because of the influence of other people. So then now to dedicate whatever positive results towards being able to really observe our life more and more from this inner perspective of how often the difficulties arise as a result of us not being aware of the arisal of our afflictions, and that the disasters that result from this come from the basis of these afflictions, of which originally arose because we did not have that alertness of mind. And then also from the lack of discernment in our life about the influences in our life. Our responsibility, and we could even extend it not just to people, but the media as well. The media, what we see on TV or read in the newspapers. The need to protect our mind. So may it be that we, from this understanding, that we live more and more as a inner being, and then become of great benefit to our souls and to others. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Venerable Tony. Very powerful.
I hope you have plenty of experiences like that in your life, because they can be really helpful. I don't know, if you don't have those and you don't have much, maybe you have less motivation to bring about change. I don't know. Is it a blessing or a curse? I don't know.